Hello, friends. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Christ and Coffee Podcast, uniting Christians one conversation at a time. My name is Dr. Hai Karlopian, and it's such a joy to have you join in to today's program. We are continuing our theme on Thanksgiving-related topics. Last week, we talked about how giving thanks is a way to protect us from entitlement and avoid the trap of falling into a victim mindset. And today, I want to talk about how showing hospitality destroys racism. But before we begin, please like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcast. I am super grateful that you're tuning in to listen to today's devotion. Please grab a cup of coffee and enjoy this message. Hospitality destroys racism. It's such a radical virtue that is a requirement for Christians to do. And hospitality is this ability to not just tolerate people who are different than us, but to actually break bread with them, to show love to the stranger. In fact, the word hospitality in the Greek, so when you see it in your New Testament Bible, it means philoxenia. It literally is love the stranger. Philos is the word we get for brotherly love. That's where you get the word Philadelphia, for example. It's the city of brotherly love. And here it's loving brotherly with affection, a sibling affection to someone who's completely different and foreign from you, loving the stranger. And it's the exact opposite of xenophobia. Like literally, it's the exact opposite of xenophobia is hospitality. Xenophobia is the fear of the other, the fear of the stranger, the fear of the alien. And philoxenia, hospitality, is showing love to the person who's in front of you. And I love that the Bible talks about how hospitality is our command, because it doesn't say just tolerate people who are different from you or tolerate strangers. It actually commands us to love the other. And hospitality is a tangible way we show love to someone who's different from us. We welcome them to our home. We provide a meal for them. We break bread with them. It's actually creating a space where you could show love to someone who's completely different than you. Henry Nouwen has this great quote: "Hospitality means primarily the creation of a free space where the stranger can enter and become a friend instead of an enemy. Hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them a space where change can take place. It's not to bring men and women over to our side, but to offer freedom not disturbed by dividing lines." This is the beauty of hospitality. It creates conversations. And part of this podcast is to create conversations between maybe theological dividing lines or cultural lines. And what we're going to do as we bring in guests this coming year is to bring people, just to have conversations, to create unity, one conversation at a time. And the only way we could do that is through this beautiful Christian virtue called hospitality. And hospitality is a commandment in Scripture. It is repeated time and time again throughout the Bible to be hospitable. Romans 12:13 says, "Love must be sincere, hate what is evil, cling to what is good, be devoted to one another in love." Very popular passage, but let's keep going. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patience in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. And here it is, the summation of that paragraph. Practice hospitality. Put into practice the love of strangers. Put into practice showing your home to someone, to providing a meal for someone by grabbing the check and paying it for someone, because that's our command, is to practice hospitality. I love that the Bible requires in its leadership for church leaders to be hospitable. Imagine you're applying as a pastor for a job and you're not someone who could show hospitality. It should be a red flag. It's that important, showing hospitality, this ability to show love to the stranger, to be someone who could open their home, open their lives to people, to create that safe environment, to just hear someone speak and hear what their worldview is about. Here's a trustworthy saying, as 1 Timothy 1:6 says: "Whoever aspires to be an overseer or an elder or a leader, put in your word, or bishop, depending on your tradition. Whoever desires to be a leader, it's a noble task." So if you have this desire to be a church leader, great, good for you. Here's some of the requirements. Be above reproach, faithful to your wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, and there is our word, hospitable. It's a beautiful virtue to put on hospitality. Able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. Titus 1:4-8 says the same thing. For a leader of God's stewards must be above reproach. He must not be arrogant or quick-tempered or a drunkard or violent or greedy for gain. That's a no-brainer. But what about this? But be hospitable, a lover of good, self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. Hospitality is a virtue that we all must aspire to become. Also, when we do practice hospitality, we should do it without whining. 1 Peter 4:8-10 says, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers a multitude of sin. A very popular passage, but let it tangibly be displayed how to show love. It keeps going. It says, offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Yes, hospitality takes time to prepare a meal. You're inviting people into your space. You're inviting people into your routine and your schedules. When we show hospitality, we should do it without whining, without grumbling. And each of you should use whatever gifts you have received to serve others. If you have a home, share it with someone. If you have the resources to pay for someone's meal, buy the meal. If you're able to house someone as a guest, do it. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. There's various forms of hospitality, and each of us are blessed in certain ways, whether we have the resources or time or both or the space to open up our hearts and our homes to people who are different. This is the love that God commands us to do, this love of the other. It's hospitality. Never know who you're serving to when you're showing hospitality. Hebrews 13:1-2 says, keep on loving one another as brothers and sisters. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing. And this is a reference to the story of Abraham, where he showed hospitality to three figures who are angels. And when we show hospitality to someone we don't know, we never know who we're really showing love to. We never know who we're opening our hearts to. And that's the beautiful thing about hospitality. You're supposed to do it regardless of who's in front of you, whether they're your friend, whether they're your enemy, whether they're someone you really like, whether they're family. It's a command for us to show hospitality. And notice that all these verses, there's this aspect of love. But what does the love look like? The love is expressed through hospitable acts. It's the ability to show love to people. And if you look throughout Jesus' ministry, a lot of his ministry was around the table. He got in trouble because he ate with sinners and tax collectors. Zacchaeus showed hospitality to Jesus after he repented. He repented of his sin of stealing money. He repaid extra for the people he stole from. And people were upset that Jesus was going to have a hospitable encounter with this tax collector. But that's the beauty. Because Jesus was showing hospitality, because there was this community event of breaking bread, I'm staying in your home, Zacchaeus' life was transformed. Because of the hospitality, someone like Zacchaeus was able to be transformed. He was no longer some thief who was taxing his own people, but he became someone who served his people, and it all took an opportunity for Jesus to invite himself to his home. The beautiful thing about hospitality is it's doable in various degrees. Coming from an Armenian background, I take for granted how entwined this is in my culture. I love Armenian hospitality. A lot of cultures from the Middle East have great hospitality engraved in them. Even in America, there's various degrees of hospitality. There's Southern hospitality, but places like New York and California, not so much. Now, there could be a dark side to hospitality. There's not pure motives. There could be some one-upping of hospitality, trying to climb a social ladder of sorts. That exists in every culture too. But having hospitality versus no hospitality is a better thing to have. And having hospitality with pure motives, with no agenda, is the best thing to have. And it's part of a Christian to make sure, even if our culture is not very hospitable, to make sure we ourselves are hospitable, because this is the main tool the Bible is saying to show love to the other. Hospitality, breaking bread, covering someone's meal, opening your home, showing love in tangible, practical ways. The church father, St. John Chrysostom, John the Golden Tongue, that's what the name means. He was a bishop of Constantinople. And he talked about hospitality a lot, especially when he was preaching through Genesis with Abraham and that three angels story. And the beautiful thing about John Chrysostom is that he encouraged all Christians to make sure they had a guest room, because he said you never know when Jesus is going to visit. And that Jesus was a reference to the stranger, the other. He encouraged his flock to make sure that they could be hospitable. And you have to keep in mind, hospitality was such a unique thing. And because of this virtue, it led to bigger things to take place. The word hotel, hostel, hospital, they all stem from this root word hospitality. And it's known that Saint Basil was one of the first people to open up a place where there could be a hospital. These things we take for granted come from this virtue, this practice of showing love, opening your doors, creating a home, a room for the other, for the sick, for the needy, for the poor, for your friend, for your enemy, opening that space up. And John Chrysostom has this amazing quote from one of his sermons. He says, "Let us imitate this and display much zeal in practicing hospitality, not merely to receive some recompense for these perishable and corruptible things, but to lay up for ourselves as well the enjoyment of immortal blessings. When we show hospitality, we're storing up treasures in heaven." He continues, "You see, if we practice hospitality, we shall welcome Christ here, and he will in turn welcome us in those mansions prepared for those who love him, and we shall hear from him, 'Come, my Father's blessed ones, take possession of the kingdom prepared for you from the foundations of the world.' Why so? For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you made me welcome." That's hospitality. "I was in custody, and you came to see me." What could be less troublesome than this? He didn't bid us to scrutinize and investigate those about to be given hospitality by us, did he? "You play your part," he says, "even if the person is of lowly station and uninviting. I will take as done to myself what is done to them." Hence he added, "Whatever you did to one of the least of my brethren, you did to me." When we show hospitality, we're showing the Christ-like love. We're welcoming Christ, and we're becoming like Christ by showing grace, love, by opening our homes, by providing meals, by sharing meals to the other. Hospitality is a greater thing than tolerance because it breaks bread, it destroys divisions of all types, whether they're ethnic divisions, socioeconomic divisions. Hospitality destroys the schisms. It's the love of the stranger, and it's the thing that we need to do to make sure that racism, divisions, arrogance in our heart is not there, by simply loving people who are different than us. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Remember to show hospitality, to practice it, and do it without grumbling. And make sure, as you're enjoying this Thanksgiving meal tomorrow, be grateful. I am grateful for you to tuning in to the end of this program. And God bless you. Have a great week. Practice hospitality. Invite someone over for a cup of coffee. That's what we're about here at the Christ and Coffee podcast. Having conversations, being hospitality over a cup of coffee. God bless you. Have a great week.